The monitor in delivery suite 412 didn't just beep. It pulsed. A rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat that seemed to mock the erratic staccato of my own. Another contraction surged, a white-hot wave of pressure that started in my spine and radiated outward until the world narrowed down to the sensation of Daniel's hand, calloused, warm, and trembling. "You're doing it, Emma," Daniel whispered. His voice was a tether to reality. "Just a little longer. Our girl is almost here." The room was bathed in the amber glow of the salt lamps we'd brought from home. Debussy played softly from a Bluetooth speaker, a deliberate choice to keep the world away. For 6 hours, we had existed in this sacred bubble. Then, the bubble burst. The heavy oak doors didn't just open, they slammed against the wall with a violence that sent the ivy pole rattling. The music was instantly swallowed by the sharp clack-clack of designer pumps on the hospital tile. "We're here, clearly, not a moment too soon," Victoria Montgomery announced. She didn't look like a woman visiting a hospital, she looked like a woman presiding over a board meeting. Her Chanel suit was unwrinkled, her silver blonde hair lacquered into a helmet that defied physics. Behind her, Robert moved like a shadow, tall, monolithic, his face a mask of permanent, aristocratic boredom. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery," the nurse said, stepping forward with a look of practiced professional firmness. "I'm sorry, but we have a strict policy. Only one support person is permitted during active labor. I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the maternity lounge." Victoria didn't even look at the nurse. She looked through her. "Nonsense. This is a Montgomery milestone. Policies are for people who don't have a vested interest in the outcome." "We are staying. Mom, please," Daniel groaned, his eyes shut tight as he braced for the next wave of my pain. "Not now. Emma is literally crowning. Just get out." "I am perfectly aware of what Emma is doing, Daniel," Victoria said, pulling a compact from her Hermes clutch to check her lipstick. "Though the timing is rather convenient, isn't it? Barely 9 months since the wedding. One might say the math is aggressive." The implication hung in the air like a foul odor. I gasped as the contraction peaked, my nails digging into Daniel's forearm. "She's ready," the doctor called out, ignored by the intruders. "We need to be here, Daniel," Robert added, his voice a low, vibrating bass that usually commanded rooms of 1,000 investors. "This child will inherit a legacy that spans 4 generations. We aren't here for the sentiment. We are here for the vetting." "Vetting," I managed to choke out between ragged breaths. "I'm giving birth to your granddaughter, Robert. Not auditing a Fortune 500 company." Victoria stepped closer to the bed, her cold grey eyes, the same eyes Daniel had, yet stripped of all warmth, scanning me with clinical disgust. "We all know your history, Emma. A girl from the foster care system, no records, no family, working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on until my son wandered into that coffee shop. You saw an opportunity. We just want to ensure that the opportunity actually carries the Montgomery DNA." "That's enough," Daniel roared. He stood up, abandoning his seat to face his father. "You leave, now, or I will have hospital security drag you out in front of the entire staff." "One more push, Emma," the doctor shouted, his voice urgent. The world dissolved into a blur of agony and adrenaline. I tuned out Victoria's scoff and Robert's stoic silence. I pushed with a feral intensity, a scream tearing from my throat that silenced even the Montgomerys. And then, the silence was broken by a thin, melodic wail. "A girl," the doctor breathed. "Beautiful and healthy." They placed her on my chest. She was a warm, slippery weight, smelling of salt and new beginnings. She had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, defiant chin. "She's perfect," Daniel sobbed, his hand hovering over her back as if she were made of spun glass. Victoria leaned over the bed, her shadow falling across my daughter's face. She didn't smile, she squinted. "She doesn't look like a Montgomery." The room went icy, even the nurse paused in her cleaning. "What?" I whispered, clutching my daughter closer. "The Montgomery jawline is dominant. The bridge of the nose, the set of the eyes. It's been consistent for a century," Victoria said with theatrical skepticism. "This child looks pedestrian." Daniel, look at her. She looks nothing like your baby photos. Mom, I'm warning you. Daniel's voice was shaking with a rage I'd never seen. If you say one more word about my daughter, you are dead to me. The girl appears out of nowhere, Robert said, stepping up beside his wife like a corporate defense team. She claims to have no living relatives. She gets pregnant weeks after the ceremony. Any man of standing would have questions. Daniel, we are merely protecting your interests, and the families. I looked at them, really looked at them. For 3 years, I had tried to earn their respect. I had endured the snide comments about my lack of a pedigree, the accidental omissions from family dinners, the way Victoria would check her silverware after I left. I realized then that there was no winning. There was only the truth. You want proof? I said, my voice eerily calm. You want to know if I've been unfaithful to the Montgomery name? A simple DNA test would clear the air, Victoria said, flashing a saccharine, predatory smile. Unless, of course, there's something in that colorful past of yours that you'd rather keep hidden. Fine, I said, order the tests. Right now, we don't leave this hospital until the results are in. Emma, you don't have to do this, Daniel pleaded. I know she's mine. I care, I said, looking Victoria in the eye. But we're doing it my way. A full kinship workup. We test the baby, Daniel, me, and both of you, to confirm the dominant Montgomery markers you're so proud of. Let's see exactly where this legacy comes from. Victoria laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound like breaking glass. Whatever for, we know who we are. Do you? I countered. Because if we're questioning integrity and bloodlines, let's be thorough. Unless you're afraid of what might be hiding under those manicured lawns. I saw it then, a flicker, a microscopic twitch in Robert's jaw, a momentary widening of Victoria's pupils. It was gone in a heartbeat, replaced by a mask of indignant offense. Fine, Victoria snapped. If it ends this charade and gets you to sign the prenup-mandated separation papers when the truth comes out, we'll play your little game. The 48-hour vigil. The following 2 days were a slow-motion car crash. The hospital's legal counsel was brought in. Because of the Montgomerys' donations to the wing, the tests were expedited. I stayed in my room, nursing Julia, while Daniel paced the halls like a caged animal. He barely spoke to his parents, who had taken up residence in a VIP waiting suite, treating the hospital staff like their personal servants. On the morning of the 3rd day, we were summoned to a secure conference room on the executive floor. Dr. Patricia Henley, the hospital's chief of medicine, sat at the head of the table. She looked tired. Next to her sat a man in a dark suit who didn't look like a doctor. The results are back, Dr. Henley began. She held a thick manila folder. As requested, we ran a comprehensive kinship analysis. We used 3 separate labs to ensure there was no margin for error, given the sensitivity of the request. Victoria smoothed her skirt. Please, doctor, just read the confirmation of the girl's infidelity so we can move on. Dr. Henley cleared her throat. First, baby Julia. The tests confirm with 99.99% certainty that Daniel Montgomery is the biological father. Daniel let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He gripped my hand under the table. I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, sharpening focus. And the mother? Robert asked, his voice tight. Emma Montgomery is the biological mother, Dr. Henley said. However, as requested by the mother, we also compared Daniel's DNA against the samples provided by Robert and Victoria Montgomery. The silence in the room became heavy, thick enough to choke on. The results are discrepant, Dr. Henley said, her eyes darting to the man in the suit. What does discrepant mean? Victoria demanded. Speak English, woman. It means, the man in the suit intervened, that there is a 0% probability that either Robert or Victoria Montgomery are the biological parents of Daniel. The world seemed to tilt. Daniel froze. Victoria's face didn't just go pale. It turned a sickly, translucent grey. That's a lie, Robert roared, slamming his fist on the table. He's our son. We have the birth certificates. We have the records from Riverside General. The DNA doesn't lie. Mr. Montgomery, the man said. My name is Detective Miller. I'm with the State Bureau of Investigation. And we've been waiting for these results for a very long time. The conference room door opened. An elderly woman walked in. She was dressed simply in a navy wool coat. Her hair was a crown of silver, and her eyes, I gasped. She had Daniel's eyes, not the cold grey of Victoria's, but a deep, soulful sea blue. Hello, Daniel, she whispered. Her voice was like a lullaby from a dream he couldn't quite remember. Who are you? Daniel asked, his voice cracking. My name is Margaret Sinclair, she said. She walked toward him, ignoring the two officers who had slipped into the room behind her. And 31 years ago, my daughter Julia had a baby boy in the psychiatric ward of Riverside General. Victoria made a sound, a high-pitched, keening noise that sounded like a tea kettle. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she slumped back into her chair. Julia was suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, Margaret said, her gaze turning to Victoria with a lethal intensity. She was alone. I was out of the country, trying to get back to her. Her husband had walked out. She was the perfect target. You have no proof, Robert hissed, though his hands were shaking so violently he had to hide them under the table. I have 30 years of private investigator invoices, Margaret replied. I have the testimony of a retired nurse who finally found her conscience on her deathbed. She told us how an administrator named Victoria, who couldn't conceive and had been rejected by every adoption agency in the tri-state area, paid to have a stillbirth recorded in the ward's logs. Detective Miller stepped forward. The nurse confirmed that a healthy baby boy was handed over in the parking lot to a man fitting Robert Montgomery's description. The stillborn baby was never buried because there was no body. You just walked away with him. We gave him a life. Victoria suddenly screamed, her composure shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. She was a mental patient. A waitress. He would have grown up in the same trailer park Emma came from. We made him a Montgomery. We gave him the world. You killed her, Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than Victoria's scream. My Julia. She never believed he was dead. She spent 20 years in and out of facilities, looking for a ghost. She took her own life because she couldn't live in a world where her son was gone. You didn't just steal a baby. You erased a woman. Daniel was shaking. He looked down at his hands, the hands of a stranger. He looked at the daughter in his arms, the girl he had named Julia Margaret just hours ago, purely by instinct. You're not my parents, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. It was an extraction. You're kidnappers. Daniel, darling, listen to me. Victoria reached out, her manicured hand trembling. Don't, Daniel said. The word was a wall. The aftermath. The arrest was quiet. Robert went out with his head down, the corporate titan reduced to a common felon. Victoria fought, screaming about her legacy, until the handcuffs clicked shut and the elevator doors closed. In the weeks that followed, the Montgomery legacy evaporated. It turned out that much of the family's prestigious history had been built on similar foundations of fraud and intimidation. The estate was tied up in the largest identity theft and kidnapping suit in the state's history. But in the quiet of our home, a different story was being written. Margaret Sinclair didn't ask for anything. She sat on our porch and told Daniel stories about his mother. She told him that Julia was a pianist who could play Chopin by ear. She told him about the Sinclair family's history, not one of oil and investments, but of teachers, sailors, and survivors. I used to wonder why I felt like an outsider in that house, Daniel told me one night as we watched the sunset. I thought it was because I wasn't cold enough. I wasn't Montgomery enough. I spent 30 years trying to fit into a mold that was stolen from someone else. He looked at our daughter, who was sleeping in Margaret's lap. Ironic, isn't it? I said. Victoria wanted a DNA test to prove I didn't belong. Instead, she proved that she was the only one who never did. Daniel leaned over and kissed my forehead. She was right about one thing, though. The bloodline is important, but it's not about the name. It's about the truth. We renamed our daughter Julia Margaret Sinclair. The Montgomery name died in that hospital room, buried under the weight of a 30-year-old crime. As I watched Margaret hum a lullaby to the granddaughter she thought she'd never see, I realized that the greatest verification wasn't found in a lab report. It was found in the way Daniel finally looked at peace. The villains had been right. The truth will out. They just didn't realize it would be the one thing that finally set the sun free.